The shuttle from a human transport dock was late. This was not unusual. Human vessels ran on a scheduling philosophy that other species found baffling. Aggressive optimism combined with an apparent belief that deadlines were suggestions rather than facts. Instructor Reth had learned, in his 10 years at the Axiom Academy of Unified Combat Arts, to add 40 minutes to any arrival window mark human cohort inbound. What was unusual was what they looked like when they finally came down the ramp. 43 of them. Various shades of the species' limited melanin range. Various heights within a narrow band their biology permitted. They wore standard-issue, transit clothing and carried Academy-issued duffel bags. They were, by every metric Reth had learned to use, unremarkable. And yet, Reth had processed 600 intakes in his career. He knew what new cadets looked like, the particular mixture of excitement and terror that first years wore like a second skin, the way they held themselves slightly too still, trying to seem composed, and revealing the effort in the trying. The humans were not still. They moved down the ramp talking to each other, gesturing, laughing at things Reth could not hear. One of them, a compact young woman with dark circles under her eyes from transit sleep deprivation, was eating something from a foil packet while simultaneously arguing a point with her free hand. Another had already begun cataloging the training grounds with a systematic eye sweep of someone making tactical assessments, then noticed Reth watching and gave him a small, direct nod. Like they owned the place. Not arrogantly, just as though being somewhere new had not yet informed them they should be uncertain. Reth noted this in his intake report that evening under the field marked initial impressions. He wrote, unaware of what they don't know. Monitor. He would later cross this out and write something else entirely. But that came later. The physical assessment ran for 3 days. It was the same battery the Academy had administered for 800 years. Stamina ceilings, structural stress tests, pain response mapping, cognitive performance under physical load. The data fed into placement algorithms that had been refined across dozens of species and thousands of intake classes. The system was, the faculty agreed, essentially perfect. On the second day, the system flagged an error. The error was Cadet Yael Doran, 22 years old, from a mid-sized human population center on the eastern seaboard of one of Earth's larger continents. She had dark circles under her eyes that had not faded since arrival. She ate constantly. The humans all did, a metabolic quirk that the Academy kitchens had long since adapted for. And she slept in the aggressive, immediate way of someone who had learned to rest efficiently rather than well. The stamina ceiling test was designed to run until the subject collapsed or signaled termination. The monitoring droid tracked biometrics and ended the test automatically at the threshold of organ distress. The ceiling was set high enough that no cadet had ever approached it. The Academy record, held by a Veluan third year, was 2 hours and 41 minutes. At 4 hours, the monitoring droid sent its first error report to the assessment center. Subject metrics: nominal. Threshold not reached. Elapsed time exceeds projected maximum. Request parameter review. The assessment technician, a methodical Kethali named Sorav, who had processed 7 intake classes without incident, reviewed the parameters. They were correct. He reviewed the droid's sensors. They were functioning. He walked down to the testing floor and looked through the observation window. Doran was still running. Not sprinting. Not performing. Just running. The steady, almost meditative pace she had settled into around the 90-minute mark. Her breathing controlled. Her face wearing the particular expression Sorav would spend the next 2 years trying to accurately describe in reports. Somewhere between focus and absence. Like a machine that had found its rhythm and saw no reason to stop. She ran for 6 hours and 14 minutes. When she finally stepped off the track, she drank half a liter of water, ate 2 protein bars, and asked when the next assessment was scheduled. Sorav stood very still for a moment. Then he updated her file. Under species baseline notes, he wrote, "Standard parameters do not apply. Flag for specialized tracking." Then he went home and sat quietly in his apartment for a while, which was his personal method for processing things that did not fit his existing understanding of the world. Instructor Reth had not lost a first-year bout in 10 years. He was not proud of this in any performative way. It was simply a fact, like his height or his species. He was Gorath, 2.3 meters ceramic-layered bones, for upper limbs built for independent grappling. He had 3 combat doctorates and a service record that new cadets sometimes Googled before their first practical, hoping it would tell them something useful. It told them only that he was very good at what he did, which they already knew, and nothing at all about how to beat him, which was the information they needed. The bout against Cadet Doran was scheduled for the 3rd week of term. It lasted 11 minutes. In the 3rd minute, Reth caught Doran's left arm in a controlled lock. He applied pressure, measured, precise, enough to force a yield from any cadet he had encountered. He felt the structural failure before he heard it. The compound break was clean as these things went. He released immediately and stepped back. Protocol was clear. Injury pause, cadet signals status, bout resumes or terminates per cadet decision. Doran looked at her arm. This was the moment Reth would return to later, in the quiet of his office with the lights dimmed, trying to parse what exactly he had seen. She looked at the arm the way a pilot checks a warning light, acknowledging the information, assessing its operational significance, making a decision. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then she shifted her weight, redistributed her guard to compensate for the compromised limb, and looked back at him. "Ready," she said. The monitoring droid flashed a yellow advisory. Reth ignored it. If she was fighting, he would fight. To do otherwise would be a different kind of insult. She lost. 8 minutes later, she was pinned, and she tapped the mat with her unbroken hand, and it was over. Reth spent 45 minutes in the medical bay. 3 cracked ribs, a dislocated secondary shoulder, bruising across 60% of his torso. The medic, an elderly Osiri who had patched up more cadets than she could count, looked at his chart and then looked at him. "First year?" she asked. "Human," he said. She nodded, as though this explained everything, and went to get more bone-setting gel. That evening, Reth updated the intake report. He crossed out unaware of what they don't know. Monitor. He wrote, "They know. They simply disagree." The extended adversity simulation ran for 10 days. No sleep beyond 20-minute micro-rests every 6 hours. Continuous rotating challenges. Temperature cycling between extremes. Food rationed to 70% of metabolic requirement. The Academy had run it for 300 years, refining the parameters until it sat precisely at the threshold where most species broke. Not permanently, not dangerously, but thoroughly enough to reveal what was underneath the training. By day 4, half the non-human cadets had been medically withdrawn. This was normal, expected. By day 4, 0 humans had been withdrawn. The faculty observation logs for days 5 through 10 read in aggregate like a document from a different species entirely, which in a sense they were. Day 5, 0340 hours. Cadet Mensa has been awake for 19 hours following his micro-rest, currently completing the cognitive load assessment. Error rate, 4.2%. For reference, the Kethali average at this stage is 31%. Flag for review. Day 6, 1,417 hours. Cadet Mensa fell from the obstacle course at a height of 4 meters. Impact was significant. Monitoring droid reported probable rib fracture, definite scalp laceration, possible concussion. Cadet declined medical withdrawal. Resumed obstacle course after approximately 4 seconds. Completed the circuit. Medical evaluation pending his cooperation, which has not been forthcoming. Day 7, 0200 hours. The human cadets have developed an informal rotation system for the micro-rest periods. They are staying awake in shifts to watch each other sleep, ensuring their cohort gets the maximum possible rest. This is not prohibited by the simulation parameters because no previous cohort has done it. Flagging for rule clarification before next intake. Day 8, 1,100 hours. Cadet Doran's regeneration cast malfunctioned during the morning physical rotation. Her arm is essentially unsupported. She has improvised a brace from equipment webbing and tape and has not reported the malfunction. We are aware only because Cadet Anand quietly informed the monitoring station, seemingly concerned that Doran would not. Doran, when confronted, described the improvised brace as fine, honestly. Day 10, final assessment. All 43 human cadets completed the simulation. This is the first time in the Academy's 300-year history that an entire cohort of any species has achieved full completion. The previous record was held by the Veluan intake of Galactic Standard Year 4802 at 91% completion. The faculty met the following morning to discuss the results. The meeting lasted 4 hours. At the end of it, Headmaster Velan, 63 years in her post, unflappable by the assessment of everyone who had ever served under her, sat for a long moment in silence before speaking. "Update the parameters," she said finally. "Again." "Headmaster," said one of the junior faculty, a young Gorath who had joined the Academy the same year as the current intake, "at what point do we accept that the parameters cannot be updated to account for?" "When they stop surprising us," said Velan, "which has not happened yet." She paused. "I suspect it will not happen soon." Late in the first year, a cadet named Vethra Coln requested a meeting with the headmaster. Coln was Cathali, precise, methodical, and possessed of the particular kind of intelligence that could not leave unanswered questions alone. She had spent the year watching the humans with the focused attention of someone conducting field research, and she had arrived at the meeting with notes. Velan listened to the question without interrupting. The question, stripped of its careful preamble, was this: why? Not how. The how was documented, observable, measurable in every assessment log the Academy had produced since humanity's first intake class. The how was broken arms continuing to fight and 6-hour stamina tests and improvised braces from equipment webbing. Why? Velan was quiet for a long time after the question was asked. Outside her office window, 2 human cadets were running voluntary drills in the rain. They had been out there for 3 hours. They were laughing about something. Their world, Velan said at last, was trying to kill them before they could walk upright. Coln waited. Every apex predator their evolution produced, every pathogen, every ice age, every drought, every crop failure, other groups of their own species. For millions of years, the universe presented them with problems that should have ended them, and Velan searched for the word. They persisted, not because they were the strongest or the fastest or the most resilient in any measurable biological sense. The Gorath are structurally stronger. The Veluan have superior stamina. Your people have better pain tolerance. She looked at Coln steadily. And yet the humans are here, and the creatures that hunted them on their own world are in museums. But why? Coln pressed. What is the mechanism? What makes them? The mechanism, said Velan, is that they decided. Silence. Species adapt, biologically, over generations, to the pressures they face, Velan continued. The humans adapted differently. They adapted culturally. They decided, generation by generation, in every population center on their world, through every disaster and war and extinction event, that stopping was not acceptable, not as a biological imperative, as a choice. She paused. That is what you're seeing in your classmates, not a biological quirk, a philosophy that has been refined across 100,000 years of practice. Coln sat with this. They don't know they're doing it, she said slowly. Do they? They don't think of it as remarkable. To them, said Headmaster Velan, getting up is simply what you do when you fall down. The alternative has never seriously occurred to them as an option. She almost smiled. That is, I have always thought, the most remarkable thing about them. Not the resilience. The fact that they consider it ordinary. Outside, the rain was getting heavier. The 2 cadets were still running. Coln watched them for a moment. What do we do with that, she asked. As their instructors, their allies. Whatever we will be to them after graduation. How do we account for a species that has decided its limits are negotiable? Velan considered this with the patience of someone who had been considering it, in one form or another, for 63 years. You don't account for it, she said. You stand next to it, and you are very grateful it is pointed in the same direction as you. In the final rankings of the first-year intake class of Galactic Standard Year 4847, 11 of the top 20 cadets were human. 11 out of 43 from a species that had been spacefaring for less than 3 centuries. Instructor Reth posted the rankings himself, as he did every year. He stood in the corridor afterward and looked at the list for a while. Then he went back to his office, opened his intake notes from orientation week, and read what he had written. Unaware of what they don't know. Monitor. He deleted it. In its place, he wrote the only thing that, after a full year, still seemed accurate. They know exactly what they are. The rest of us are still catching up. He saved the file. Outside his window, in the rain, someone was still running.